Everybody, TC Bradley, host of God Made Millionaire TV, the hottest show on daytime television. And I've been waiting all week for you, yes, you to stop on by and watch our show. And what a show we've got lined up for you today. Waiting on set, we have Lieutenant Colonel Frank Bonvillain. Colonel Bonvillain is a true American patriot, a career combat veteran who has served our great nation in 5 war zones, from the jungles of Vietnam to Iraq and Afghanistan. You do not want to miss this powerful story after a life-altering crisis in Vietnam to contemplating suicide. Colonel Bonvillain eventually grew to recognize God's steady, unwavering hand guiding him through it all. Be encouraged by this true story of God's supernatural miracles performed throughout an ordinary soldier's life in service for our great country. So, without any further ado, let's crack open the God Made Millionaire Bank Vault and let's activate some God-given dreams. Lieutenant Colonel, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me, Mr. Bradley. I appreciate being here.
Well, Colonel Bonvillain, you are one of our nation's heroes. And I want to thank you for your selfless sacrifice to our great nation and what you've given to our country and the courage of your being, of who you are. So thank you so much from a grateful nation for your service to this great country of ours.
Well, thank you for saying that. I'm not really sure I'm a hero, but I appreciate the words.
You answered the call.
Well, yeah, I did that, but I think Will Rogers once said that being a hero is the shortest-lived profession in the world. So it doesn't last very long. Not a real hero, but it was a pleasure to serve. I enjoyed it. Most of it. Not all of it.
Right.
But a lot of it.
Right. Right. Well, I want to dive into you have very specific reasons for you to come on the show today. So I want to do a deep dive on your motivation for coming on the show, because you're very clear about that you don't fit the mode of the typical guests that we have on God Made Millionaire TV.
Yes, sir.
So
I couldn't figure out why God was asking me to be on this show, because he doesn't normally talk to me like he does some of your guests that I've heard on the show. But it was definitely God, and he was definitely telling me to be on the show. And I don't really fit the mold. I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm not a business person. I don't have a book to sell. I think the interesting thing is that I don't want to think how many years. In the late 1960s, it's been over 50 years, and nobody's ever heard the whole story. I didn't tell my sons any of it until about 4 or 5 years ago. Here I am on national television.
Well, it's interesting because I say the people that we feature on our show, they come to this show because they have a prophetic mandate on their life to come. You, sir, have a prophetic mandate on your life to come, and you could have found every reason not to come, but you were obedient to what you felt God was calling you to do. And the story that you share or are about to share today is a very powerful story, very powerful story. And ladies and gentlemen, it's been years. You said it's over 40 years or 50 years that you've not shared this publicly, not even to your closest family.
No,
Right.
Until now. So
Well,
here
I
we
want to
go.
I want to give you the floor and give you that opportunity to share what's been 40 years in the making, a prophetic moment, a divine moment for you to share this powerful story that you have. So
I think it would have to start is that as a child, all I ever wanted to be was a soldier and a cowboy. I don't know why, but that was all I ever wanted to do. After high school, I went to college, not to get an education, but just to learn how to be a better soldier. and I was 17 years old, and I went to a military school, so I got a weekend pass about 3 weeks after I'd been up there, and I got drunk. We were in a car wreck, and I broke just about every bone in my body. I broke my back primarily and a bunch of other bones. And the doctors first didn't think I'd live, and then the doctor told me I wouldn't walk. The draft board, they had a draft in those days. They qualified me as 4F, which meant that I was not fit for military service. And so my whole world was over 3 weeks into school. But I beat the odds. I wouldn't listen to the doctors, and I did learn to walk again, and I learned to run. And it took a year, but I got back in college. I lost my fiance, my girlfriend. She wanted to go to college rather than marry me, which I couldn't understand then, and I still don't understand why anybody would rather have college than have me. It's a shock.
It is a shock.
It is a shock. It is. But I finally graduated from college. I got a regular Army commission in the infantry. I went to airborne school, which is parachute training. I went to Pathfinder school, and I went to Ranger school. And then I went to Vietnam. And that's exactly where I wanted to be. And that's what I wanted to do. And then on top of that, my first assignment was with the Rangers in Vietnam. Now, in the 60s, they didn't have Ranger regiments like they do now. They were individual companies that were assigned to the various divisions or separate brigades, as the case may be. But I went there, and after about 4 months, the company commander called me in and said, "What do you want to do with your life?" And I said I wanted to make the military a career. And he told me, "Well, you need to get out of the Rangers and get with this line unit, an infantry unit, because special operations were not as well thought of in the 1960s as they are in the 21st century. Everybody wants to be in special operations." Well, back then, that was a kiss of death for a professional officer. So I went to a line unit, infantry platoon leader, and I hadn't been there very long, and we got into a really bad firefight. And it was raining, which it seemed to always be doing, and we were clearing the area, and I slipped into a ravine, a gully, great big ditch. And I meant to go down in there, but I didn't mean to slip in there. And when I picked myself up, I was looking dead at 4 enemy soldiers, no further away from me than I am to you. And at the end of it, I was still standing. And anybody who's been in real combat, I mean face to face, will tell you to stand 10 feet away from somebody and everybody's shooting, and for you not to get killed, that is a miracle. That's a flat praise Jesus miracle right there, because that cannot happen, but it did. There I was. I was in Vietnam. I was a paratrooper. I was a ranger. I was an infantry officer. I was a pathfinder. And I was a combat veteran. Plus, I was suddenly a hero. And I was 21 years old. And that was a pretty heady experience. And I took 100% credit, and God got 0. I agreed that it was a miracle, but it was a miracle because I was such a stud, not because God was with me. People would come in, they would fly in on helicopters, resupply helicopters wherever my platoon was, just to touch the magic. God let me wallow in that for about 3 months, and then he cut it all off just that quick. A couple of men in the platoon said that one of those men that I had shot, I killed him after he was wounded, after he could no longer defend himself, and so basically I murdered him. And I mean, it stopped just that fast. They pulled me out of the platoon, pulled me out of the field, put me back at battalion headquarters at the fire base. In civilian terms, I was put on what you'd call house arrest. I wasn't put in jail. I mean, they were still shooting at us. So I still had my weapon, and I just had to stay in my room. There's an old saying is that military justice is to justice much like military music is to music. You're pretty much guilty till you're proven innocent. And it didn't matter whether I'd done it or not. What mattered was that all of my peers and everybody in the battalion thought I went from a real hero to a real dirtbag. I couldn't take it. Didn't have any telephones. I mean, this was 1968. There was no phones. It was 2 weeks for mail, round trip. So I had nobody, nothing, nobody to talk to. And so I just decided to commit suicide. My life was over as far as everything I'd wanted in life was done. So I took my rifle off the wall, chambered around, and I was sitting on my bunk with it in my lap. I'd already went through the issue of was I going to do it? I was going to do it. It was just, how was I going to do it? How was I going to make sure that I didn't want to miss? How was I going to get the rifle barrel in my mouth and still pull the trigger? But I was there, and knock on the door opened, and the battalion chaplain walked in, a guy by the name of Roy Mathis. And he was an old man, probably 29 or 30 years old. He talked that rifle out of my hand, and that night he saved my life. And about 30 days later, he saved my soul. I was baptized in the South China Sea, and that was another praise Jesus miracle. I'm telling you, I was 15 seconds away from blowing the top of my head off. To this day, I don't know why he came in, because I sure as heck didn't ask him to come in the door. He just did. A month after that, I went to trial. I was found not guilty. I went back to my platoon, or another platoon, went back into combat, finished out my tour, and came home. And another miracle is that the girl who had dumped me years before started writing me letters. She'd been in college, figured maybe I wasn't such a bad catch after all. We've been together now 53 years almost.
Wow.
And she's been my rock for those whole 53 years. Got 2 wonderful sons, 2 great brothers. God's given me a wonderful life. Well, I know that he never promised that if you were a Christian, you weren't going to have hardship in your life. In fact, I think just the opposite is so often the case. The really strong Christians have a very difficult time in their lives. That happened to me 40 years later, after Vietnam, after all the other wars, and God was with me all the time, or else I would have never lived through it. 40 years later, I flunked a blood test and wound up with cancer. And shortly after that, I flunked a colonoscopy and wound up with cancer again. So I had a double dose of cancer, 2 different kinds. That was a battle I really couldn't fight, despite my wife and despite being a strong Christian, or I hoped what was a strong Christian. But I beat the cancer. But the after effects, and there were some very serious after effects after the cancer, just got to me. And that was the final straw. That's what broke me. All of the demons came back that I'd kept locked up for all those years. And it just, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't relate to my wife or family or friends. And I was going down yet again, because I knew I needed help. And I was in the States. So I went to, I live in a little small town, but we have a VA clinic there. And I went into the clinic and I said, I need to see somebody. And they said, well, it'll take 3 months to get an appointment. I said, no. I need to see somebody in about 3 minutes. And they said, oh, because I wasn't going to tell the secretary I was about to kill myself. She was able to read between the lines. She got me a mental health nurse by the name of Miss Jackson. And Miss Jackson talked to me. And I talked to her for a few minutes. I told her that I just had an awful lot of demons and I needed some help. She called up the VA hospital in Tucson, and she got me linked up with an actual psychiatrist. I not only got one, I got 2. I got a psychiatrist named Dr. Gunther and a psychologist named Dr. Haynes, but they were magicians.
You had not talked to your family about this. This is something your wife didn't know about, your family?
Not at the time. She wasn't there. She had gone I think she had gone home to Texas to be with her family. And that's why it all really kind of closed in on me. I was all alone. Dorothy was gone. My children are grown. They live in Denver, outside of Denver, but I didn't have anybody there. You know, I had God, and so I prayed, but I was in bad shape. It just all came swarming back. The Dr. Gunther and Dr. Haynes were able to talk me out of it, and Dr. Haynes really, I mean, she took that gun right out of my mouth. I still see him. Once I got over the initial fear and hesitancy of going to ask for help, I decided it wasn't really such a bad thing. And so I've been with them now for a lot of years, but I still go periodically to get a tune-up. I mean, God has worked miracles in my life, and so many times I just haven't given him the credit. My wife and I have a devotional every morning where we thank God for 5 things that, I mean, it can be just being able to breathe, a beautiful day. That really helps, but it's just not enough. When you sit down and think of all the marvelous things that God has done in my life and in your life, here I am. I've told this whole story, never told it before. I'm telling it to you. I ain't believing that.
Well, it takes courage to ask for help when you needed help. I don't award a medal in the military for not asking for help. And it takes even more courage to come on here and share the story that you've held back for over 40 years now, in the hopes that you could reach somebody that's watching the show. Maybe they're going through it. Maybe they've reached the end of their rope, and you can inspire them that we do serve the God of miracles. I'm curious, with the military, how are you aware of how big this problem is with the folks? Because we've entered, in this generation, there's been so much combat that our men and women have gone into over the last several years, a lot of combat. And I'm of the opinion that a combat vet is a much different creature than a regular vet. I still have respect for both, but a combat vet, that's a different Megillah entirely. Would you agree with that?
Yes, sir, I would.
So we're sending these people to do an assignment, and they come back and they're bringing that assignment with them, and it's showing up in their lives. Is this something that is there help for those that are watching this, that are in the military, and maybe someone watching, Colonel, that is watching this and they're in the military, and they don't want to swallow their pride to ask for the help. And so how big of a problem do you think it is?
It's a very serious problem, and it's a problem. Surprisingly, there's a tremendous number of suicides from the Vietnam era veterans and the young men and women of today that are serving right now. Suicide is a big problem in the military and with people who have gotten out. They just can't deal with it. I took the uniform off after 27 years, but then I stayed the last few years. I stayed in the infantry, but the last couple of 3 years they took me into unique training, specialized training, and I became an intelligence officer, human intelligence officer. And I stayed in that. Once I retired, I stayed with the government and continued to serve. And my last tour of duty was with soldiers at Fort Huachuca in Arizona. And I saw the soldiers right out of basic training. They would come to learn intel, and that's what I taught. And I had several of my soldiers commit suicide. And one of them was one of the nicest young ladies that I trained. I mean, she was, I still remember, top of the class. And I don't know what happened to her because it was when she was in Iraq. And so I don't know what went wrong in her life, but it's a major problem.
What I'd like you to do is right now, I'd like you to speak into that camera to people that are at a crossroads of their destiny. Not necessarily in the military, but you know, you have a lot of respect within the military community, within the Ranger community. Speak to that person that is at a crossroads of their destiny, because I think that's one of the reasons that God put it so heavy on your heart to come here to share this powerful story today. So take your time, Colonel Bonvillain, and just speak to that one that's just at a crossroads of their destiny right now.
Well, I would like to say in closing one thing is that Paul tells us in Hebrews that God will never leave us or forsake us. And I'm living proof that that's the truth. You can take that to the bank. And we all need help at one time or the other. And Churchill once said that if you find yourself going through hell, it's best just to keep on going. And that's not trite. That's not words, just words. I mean, that's a really good philosophy, because it's always going to get better, and you just don't want to stop, and you don't want to quit. I'm not one for a lot of titles, and I really don't like the term post-traumatic stress disorder. Rangers don't get PTSD. We give it to other people. But we do get chronic depression. The world closes in on us just like it closes in on everybody else. And you just can't keep seeing the things that a combat soldier sees day in and day out and it not have an impact on you. The thing is that there's help out there. And it's not, you're not a wimp to ask for that help. There's nothing shameful about asking for help. Everybody comes to the end of the rope at one point or the other. The trick is just not to let go of that rope. And we all, sooner or later, need a hug. And it's not any shameful thing to ask for it. And if you're a veteran, all you got to do is dial 988. And that's a veterans hotline for suicide. As soon as you dial that number, you hit 1, and there'll be a live person that'll talk to you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And even if you're not a veteran, you can call that same line. It's not like they're going to ask for your ID card. They'll help you as well. And I'd like to leave you just one thing, is that even if you don't believe in God, God believes in you.
Wow.
And that's my story. I'm sticking to it.
Well, Colonel,
the end.
Listen, this show was different than any other show that I've done, because normally I have more interaction with the guests. But when you have someone that's waited 40 years to share this story that has not even been shared with his family until now, you let the man speak. You give him the floor. You give him the platform. And I believe lives have been impacted and touched. I thank you not only for your service, but for your courage in coming on the show today. We're going to drop a link down below for that number. If you need help, do not be shy to reach out and get the help you need. This show, some of you watch this and you think it was by random. It's not random that you're watching this show. This is God knocking on the door and telling you, no matter how tough you may be, no matter how much of a warrior you are, even warriors need help. And it's not a problem to ask for help. There's resources in place. We're going to drop a link down below. Colonel Bonvillain, thank you again for your service to our great nation, and thank you for your courage for coming on and sharing such a powerful story with over 200 nations today.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. It was worth 1970 to 2020.
Colonel, thank you so much for coming in.
It's
been an honor.
It's
an
a
extreme
real
honor of a lifetime, and thank you. And we'll look forward to having you back with your wife, because she's coming back, I can tell you. And you know I danced with your wife and did the prosperity dance on her show that she did with me.
I saw that. You ain't gonna dance with me, no. But if I'll come back with her, but I won't say anything.
Okay.
I'll just sit there.
All right.
It's too tough.
We love to have you. Thank you again for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me. It means a lot.
Everybody, can you believe we're at the end of another show? And what a powerful show it was. Dorothy, it's an honor to have you on set, the queen of the king, Lieutenant Colonel Frank Bonvillain, and we have J.L. Farron here, combat vet as well. Powerful story, J.L., that Colonel shared with us today. But it's time to throw your shades on and do your prosperity dance. Dorothy, I'm going to give you the baton and let you know to tell back.
Big Mike, hit our music.
You know, JL, I believe that God is going to raise up 1,000 God-made millionaires, at the least, through our God Made Millionaire movement, with what we're doing, with our show, with our coaching services, with everything that we're doing at God Made Millionaire. But people need support along the way. So that's why we've created the God Made Millionaire Inner Circle.
Right. The God Made Millionaire Inner Circle is where you get the opportunity to get coaching and training by myself and T.C. Bradley. I've been mentored by T.C. Bradley for over 16 years, and I saw the need for having a coach. For 16 years, there's times where I procrastinated, there's times where I felt unmotivated and discouraged, and T.C. was there right by my side to give me the coaching and the mentoring that I needed to step up. And now it's your turn to get that same mentoring and coaching as well with the God Made Millionaire Inner Circle.
You know, JL, that's the number one request that we get is people want coaching, but they want affordable coaching.
Right, and the God Made Millionaire Inner Circle will give them just that. And not only that, but the God Made Millionaire Inner Circle is very interactive. So it's not something where you just listen to us pontificate. You're actually going to get in the trenches with us, and we're going to put you on the hot seat and be able to look at your business and coach you and mentor you through your purpose.
JL, what's pontificate mean? You use some big words. What does
They
that
know
mean?
what it means. They can Google it.
Hey, if you've been given a God-given dream, this is the place. If you're one of the 1,000 God-made millionaires that God is raising up in this season, you need to be a part of the God Made Millionaire Inner Circle.